Welcome back to the Mirror Moves, where HOA drama meets karma. If you love seeing entitled people finally face justice, you're in the right place. Grab your popcorn and subscribe now. It was supposed to be the perfect weekend. The lake shimmered beneath the late afternoon sun, and the air smelled like pine and freedom, the kind of peace I'd been craving all year. My guest cabin, tucked behind my main house on a little slope overlooking the water, was ready for my brother's family to visit next week. I'd spent the morning cleaning it, stacking firewood on the porch, and double-checking the fresh linens inside. And then came the sound, the sharp clack of heels on my gravel driveway, followed by the familiar rustling of papers. I didn't even have to turn around to know who it was. Karen. If you've ever lived under an HOA, you know there's always one. The self-appointed sheriff, the clipboard queen, the enforcer of community standards. Ours happened to come packaged in designer sunglasses, a permanent scowl, and an ego that could block the sun. She didn't even say hello. "This guest cabin," she announced, tapping her clipboard like it had a direct line to the Constitution, "is now temporarily allocated for community use." I blinked, convinced I'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" She launched into a speech about some alleged HOA hospitality clause, an obscure rule she had apparently dug up that supposedly allowed the board to reassign unoccupied properties for communal benefit. And by communal benefit, she meant her family. Apparently, her sister and 3 kids were coming into town for the summer, and Karen had decided my guest cabin would be perfect for them. I laughed, not out of humor, but disbelief. "Karen, that's not how property works." Her jaw tightened. Her sunglasses slipped down just enough for me to see the fire in her eyes. "You'll regret saying that," she hissed, pointing her clipboard like a weapon. "You're already in violation of at least 5 HOA regulations, and I can escalate this to the highest level of authority if you force my hand." I told her calmly, maybe too calmly, that the cabin was private property, it wasn't up for community allocation, and that her relatives would need to book an Airbnb like normal people. That's when she snapped. She scribbled furiously on her paper, muttering under her breath, and stormed off like a cartoon villain plotting world domination. By dinner, the texts started rolling in from neighbors. "Karen's furious. Be careful. She's talking about filing a complaint. Word is, she's been gunning for you for a while." Apparently, Karen had been trying to control lake access rights for months, arguing with anyone who left kayaks by the shore, threatening to fine people for hosting barbecues, even suggesting we pay dock usage fees to the HOA. I had just become her next target. But something in her parting words chilled me. The way she said higher authorities wasn't just HOA bluster. It sounded calculated. And as I stood there, watching the lake shimmer beneath the fading sunset, I had the sinking feeling this wasn't just about a guest cabin anymore. This was about power. And Karen wasn't done. The next morning, the HOA portal pinged me with 3 separate notifications. Karen had filed official violation reports. Unauthorized guest structures, improper dock usage, failure to comply with hospitality reassignment order. Yes, she literally called it that, like my guest cabin was a government asset under military control. At first, I laughed it off. I'd dealt with Karen's theatrics before, and normally, a few emails from the HOA board were enough to squash her little crusades. But this time, something felt different. By lunchtime, I started getting calls from neighbors. Karen had gone full propaganda mode. She was telling anyone who would listen that I was harboring unregistered guests, blocking emergency lake access, and, my personal favorite, interfering with HOA-approved safety protocols. It was ridiculous. But then came the twist. That evening, as I was grilling on the deck, I noticed Karen across the street on her phone, pacing, animated, clearly escalating beyond HOA complaints. And the next morning, I found out exactly who she'd called, because that's when 3 black SUVs rolled into our quiet cul-de-sac. At first, I thought they were FBI. Big, tinted SUVs, federal plates, tactical vests under their jackets, the whole movie scene setup. My stomach dropped when I saw DHS stenciled faintly on the back of one vehicle. Neighbors peeked through blinds. Dogs stopped barking. The entire street went silent. 4 agents stepped out, scanning the area like they were prepping for a raid. One of them, a tall guy in mirrored aviators, approached my driveway. "Sir, we received an anonymous report of an illegal sublet being used for off-the-books activity. We need to ask you a few questions." I blinked. Are you serious? This is about my guest cabin. He didn't answer, which somehow made it worse. Karen, of course, was already outside, pretending to water her plants, while very loudly explaining to anyone within earshot that this was exactly what she had been warning the neighborhood about, that I was a security risk. I invited the agents to step inside and inspect the cabin themselves. They were professional but cautious, scanning every corner, taking photos, jotting notes. Meanwhile, Karen stood at the property line, hands clasped like a villain about to watch her rival crumble. But then something happened she didn't expect. The lead agent returned, glanced at my perfectly ordinary guest cabin, and said flatly, "There's no violation here." This report was baseless. Karen's face drained of color. But she wasn't ready to give up. She marched straight to the agent, waving her clipboard like it was the Constitution itself. "This man is violating multiple community statutes, and you have an obligation to enforce." The agent interrupted, calmly but firmly. "Ma'am, community disputes are not under federal jurisdiction. If you file another false report, you could face legal consequences." Her jaw literally dropped. For the first time in months, Karen had no comeback. The SUVs rolled away minutes later, leaving behind a stunned silence broken only by the sound of neighbors' doors creaking open. People started murmuring, some laughing quietly, a few even clapping. Karen stormed back to her house, slamming the door so hard it rattled windows 3 houses down. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. Because if I knew anything about Karen by now, it was this. When she loses control, she gets dangerous. And she wasn't finished. For a few days after the DHS humiliation, things were quiet. Almost too quiet. Karen didn't patrol the streets. She didn't send late-night HOA warnings. No fake violation letters, no clipboard theatrics. Some neighbors thought she'd finally surrendered. I knew better. Because when Karen goes silent, she's plotting. It started with anonymous flyers slipped into mailboxes around the neighborhood. "Is your family safe?" Bold letters. Dark borders. Fake official HOA seals. Inside, it accused me of everything from tax fraud to running an underground Airbnb ring out of my guest cabin. It even claimed the DHS visit was part of an ongoing federal investigation. I laughed until I saw how professional the flyers looked. She wasn't just scribbling notes on scrap paper anymore. She was escalating. By the next day, a Facebook post appeared on the neighborhood group. "If we don't stop reckless homeowners, property values will plummet." Guess who posted it? Yup, Karen. And she tagged nearly half the community. But this time, something was different. Instead of the usual chorus of silent compliance, neighbors began pushing back. Frank, my Ring camera hero, commented, "Funny how you care about property values now, considering DHS left your report in the trash." Then Paul, the quiet accountant, chimed in. "Also funny that HOA funds keep disappearing into administrative expenses." Care to explain, Karen? The thread exploded. Likes, laughing emojis, popcorn gifs. The whole neighborhood watching Karen unravel in real time. Karen called for an emergency HOA assembly 2 days later. She wanted control back, but she didn't know what was waiting for her. By the time I arrived at the clubhouse, the parking lot was packed. Inside, neighbors filled every seat, lining the walls, buzzing with anticipation. Karen stormed in wearing a navy pantsuit like she was about to argue before the Supreme Court. Clipboard in one hand, a stack of papers in the other. She launched into a speech about community safety and rogue homeowners undermining harmony. But this time, no one clapped. Halfway through, Paul raised his hand, holding a folder. "Karen, can you explain why the HOA budget lists $12,000 for a waterfront security system that doesn't exist?" Murmurs spread through the room. Karen stammered, saying the funds were reallocated. Frank stood up next. "Reallocated to your personal credit card? I've got receipts." And then, like a perfectly executed domino setup, 3 other neighbors came forward, one by one, sharing their stories. Absurd fines, harassment, threats. It wasn't just me anymore. Karen's eyes darted around the room, searching for allies. There were none. Finally, the HOA president, usually Karen's silent enabler, cleared his throat. "Karen, the board has reviewed your actions. Effective immediately, you are suspended pending investigation." Gasps. Karen slammed her clipboard down so hard the sound echoed. She tried to shout over the noise, calling it a conspiracy, demanding order, but no one was listening. The neighborhood had spoken, and for the first time in years, Karen walked out without a word. I thought that would be the end of it. But then, 2 weeks later, a moving truck showed up in front of Karen's house. Curtains drawn, lights off. Her reign was over. The street has been different since then. Kids play without fear of unauthorized snow angels. Neighbors wave instead of whisper. And every time I step onto my deck and see that guest cabin, I can't help but smile. Because in the end, Karen didn't just lose. She burned her own empire down, one clipboard tantrum at a time. All right, thank you for watching and see you in the next episode of the Mirror Move Stories.